All right. Good morning, everyone. Is it time we start? I think it probably is. Look, thanks for joining us all this morning. We've actually got a really interesting panel lined up, and I know with what I do in the community, I've just been getting some really interesting feedback. A lot of people are concerned about what's been happening with the waste and put in so much hard work and feel that we've gone backwards with this pandemic. You know, in some ways we have taken some steps that might feel backwards, but in other ways, I think there are some really exciting things that have come from this. And, you know, Joost in the previous presentation, of those were in there before, you know, he actually said a figure that I hadn't heard of, and he said that would reach like 100 million barrels of oil a day, which just sounds freakishly scary. But he said we're using about half of that at the moment in the world, which is a really good thing. So while in some ways it feels that we've been robbed of opportunities to reduce waste, in other ways we are reducing waste in other ways that just couldn't have been possible. And we've got 4 people who are doing some great things in the community today in their own space, who have come across different stories but types of things, and we're forging through. But this is really designed for us to have a bit of hope as to what's going on. We might kick off with Jo, actually, because I can see her microphone's off. Jo's from Good from the Hood, and she's been doing some really interesting things with the community well before now, but even moving forwards. I'm going to hand it to you, Jo, just to tell us a little bit about what you're doing, especially in this time, but overall as well.
Hi, yes, thanks, Kirsty. I am Jo Taranto. I'm one of the co-founders of Good for the Hood. And we, myself and Karina, live in Ryde in Sydney. And we started, as a lot of people do, in this zero waste space, you know, in our own homes, in our own backyards, looking at our consumption habits after we had kids. And then from that, we started building a community around us, our neighbours, the streets around us, with food hubs, and looking at how we can reduce single-use plastics. And then we just thought, you know, this is something that's so beautiful and brings all the people together in our hood, our neighbourhood. So why can't we replicate this good in our suburbs? So we created a really grassroots and looking back at times fairly terrible community campaign, but also something that we were really passionate about, called 5 for Ride, which was about ditching 4 single-use plastics and learning to reduce contamination in recycling. And then fast forward through that, we learned a lot. We learned all the things we were perhaps doing that weren't so great when it comes to engagement. And then we also learned that there was some really beautiful basic things that any community campaign should have. So we worked with the second series of War on Waste with Craig Rewcastle and the ABC on developing a toolkit that would give people those basic things that a good community waste campaign has. So from there, we've been working with lots of different communities around Australia, lots of war and waste groups, and then also developing, working with lots of brands and businesses who are looking to reduce their waste. So it's now a social enterprise that takes up more time than I ever would have imagined, but it's a really beautiful thing to be part of, and it's been built from a very grassroots place.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us. It sounds like you're doing some really great things out there. I'm going to ask David if you can unmute yourself. David is up in the Gold Coast, and I love that he's with us, because if we were doing this, you know, in person, he probably wouldn't have come down to visit us. I'm sure he would have loved to, but you know. But David's got an interesting story in the sense that they were about to launch their tool library and their repair cafe, and then we hit a pandemic. Can you tell us a bit about that, David?
Yes, hi. Thanks for having us here, and hello to everybody. Yeah, so Gold Coast Tool Library and Repair Cafe, we've been doing all the background work. We had everything set ready to go. We had some venues set up for our pop-up Repair Cafe events, had the community all on board and all enthusiastic. And of course, then COVID hit, and with a big number of our volunteers and potential volunteers more on the elderly sector, who are therefore probably a little bit more at risk. We obviously had to can all of that. But a little bit about my background, I've always sort of been passionate about reducing waste. I've come from a horticulture background, and in nature, there is no such thing as waste. You know, waste is a construct of man. We invented that. So everything to me is sort of all about cycles, and I'd always see people throwing stuff out, and like, I'm not a hoarder myself. I'm a bit of a minimalist, but I'd always see things that was like, you can't throw that out. That's really good. Like, somebody could use that. There was often just that missing link of how do we connect that item that's trash for somebody and create an opportunity for it to flow through to somebody else. So hence that's why we're starting the tool library, and there's already some awesome tool libraries operating around the country, including Brunswick there in Melbourne. And with over 2,000 repair cafes around the world, this is certainly not a new concept. And there's plus, you'd probably add at least another 1,000 more to that with other types of fix-it initiatives. But sort of one of the great things that I take as a positive, like, from COVID, is how much we've all been on Zoom. Sometimes we've been over Zoomed and doing way too many sessions, but it's enabled so many of us to connect in with people around the country and around the world that we wouldn't normally sort of get to be with. There's an International Lending Library Alliance that's sort of formed, and so I've been sitting there with Zoom, and we've been connecting with all the tool libraries from, Canada, US, UK, Europe, Iceland, also, of course, in Australia and New Zealand, and we've all managed to sort of get together and talk with each other. And so we're now starting to create a wiki where we're all starting to share all of our information, so that all of those tool libraries coming behind us have a suite of information that they can get going. But what's been really inspiring is watching all of the repair cafes and fix-it initiatives going online. There's been some great ones I've been tuning into. Bauer Reuse Repair Centre. They've been running some awesome online sessions. They've got it all there on their Facebook page, past videos to go and have a look at any time. What is it? Luke and Shane, they're a couple of young guys. Like last week, they were talking about tiny houses. Today, they're doing about repairing tools and looking at repairing old tools. Some awesome stuff. And a lot of the repair cafes have gone online with virtual online sessions now. So, we've got to connect in with some Makerspace down in Adelaide. They've been running some good ones, and Moonee Valley had some other good ones. And there's so many of the online repairing setups now, which is enabling far more people to communicate. And even though you might be stuck at home, they'll set up a webcam and they'll show what's going on with their repairing, so you can learn away from the comfort of your own home. And so many more people are connecting and communicating, which we've got to always look for a silver lining. And to me, that's one of the great takeaways that's come out of the last few weeks, is I have met so many more amazing and wonderful people and had an opportunity to connect and share.
Actually, I had a question as you were saying that, and I think you've just answered it. Like, do you think it sounds like you're connecting far more than you otherwise may have if we didn't have this pandemic? Is that fair to say in your situation?
I reckon 300% more connecting and communicating with people. I've spent a fair bit of time in the last 6 months, sort of as we were getting going. A repair cafe opened up at Sandgate up there in Brisbane, so I went up and sort of joined in, and had lots of communicating back and forth with the team there as we were sort of a similar stage in building. And a lot of the tool libraries around the country had been very helpful in communicating with us and sharing information. But the reach into just so many more areas of the country and also internationally has just blossomed with people sharing information and sharing experiences since COVID's hit.
That's fantastic. Your story's got a more of a heart ending than I thought it was going to, which is great. I'd like Letitia to jump on now. If you can just turn your microphone on, because Letitia was actually in an established tool library when the pandemic came in. So I'd like to hear about how the Brunswick Tool Library has made some changes to support the community during this time.
During this time, so already as an established library. So we started discussion before restrictions came in. So we have an online forum, and so we started having some chats about potential for the future. So when restrictions came in, we definitely closed down. And then we started weekly meetings. So that actually gave us a really, as David was saying, connected immediately. We weren't having, we had our online forum, but we weren't actually all coming together at the same time. So that really made a great difference. And that's when we started discussing other options. So we actually implemented a delivery service. So we were just open and people would come and pick up. So then we implemented delivery, And we made sure that we looked into safety of our volunteers, the tools for our members, making sure we did the groundwork to cover the safety issues, and what would be required to also do it to satisfy restrictions. So we have a great team that worked on that together to make sure we did all those things. And recently we reopened, and we really made sure that we again did the groundwork, all the background work, and we delegated different jobs to different people, looking into making sure we were covering volunteers, making sure we were distancing and sharing the information that was important. So creating a new layout for like a click and collect service. So again, we used to just be like a library, you walk in, you pick what you want, and we do it on the spot. But now we have implemented where you pre-book, we organise it beforehand. So it is a little more preparation for us behind the scenes. It keeps everyone protected. And of course, we're making sure we're wearing gloves, doing lots of cleaning and keeping things happening. So it's been really great.
Great. It's a big undertaking. I just want to add something that I don't think you said. These are all volunteers. No one's being paid to do this. And I think that, you know, that's even more amazing, because these are people who are, I don't know, it sounds to me like they're actually volunteering even more now than they were before to get this done. Can I just ask you, if people are sitting here going, the Brunswick Tool Library, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were a thing. How can they find you?
I can actually share some information in the, well, we've got a Q&A or the comments. We do have a Facebook presence. And
is it just Brunswick Tool Library? They can just find you on Facebook, and we'll get the links and send them through. I think we'll send a follow-up email as well. But if they want to find you before they get the email, is it just Brunswick Tool Library and you're on Facebook? I think that's right. Yes,
brunswicktoolllibrary.org, because we are an organisation. And yeah, Brunswick Tool Library on Facebook.
Great. So look them up. Thank you. We'll come back to you soon, but really love what you're doing there. Now, if we can get Ellie on from Share Waste. I know I do a lot of talks and presentations on, you know, reducing food waste and plastic waste and all that type of thing. And a question that I get asked quite frequently is, I live in a unit, or I don't have a backyard and I want to compost and I can't. And if I can't, I don't want it to go to landfill. What can I do? And I always talk about share waste. So I'm really glad Ellie's here to tell us a bit more.
Good morning, everyone. So I should probably tell you a little bit about how we started. So in 2016, we had a lot of conversations with my husband about our waste, and we realized that about 80% of all waste we produce was compostable. You would think, okay, compostable, fine. Why didn't you start composting? Well, we couldn't, because we, like many other people, lived in an apartment unit. We didn't have any access to a garden, and there was no available service. So I thought, well, look at all these beautiful scraps. Maybe some local gardener would be happy to accept them and compost them in their compost bin. So I offered our scraps to the local gardening community, and very soon we had one very amazing gardener who was happy to accept all our waste. So we started doing this waste sharing. And when we realized that it actually functions, we had this bold assumption that there must be other people who are exactly in the same position, who are exactly in the same situations that they would like to compost, but they can't. So that's actually how Share Waste, the app, was born. At the moment, we have 2 mobile apps anybody can download for free. And we have a desktop app, and you can either register as a compost host or a Share Waste scraps donor. Compost hosts are people who have a worm farm, a compost bin, or chickens who would like to accept some excess waste to make more compost and fertilizer for themselves. And on the other hand, there are food scraps donors who produce waste, but no, they don't have the capacity to compost or recycle it in any other way. So what we basically do is we help these people find each other so that together they could reduce more waste going to landfill and make the gardens greener.
That's great. I love the way you call them food scrap donors. It doesn't sound like they're trying to get rid of their rubbish or their waste anymore. That's great. What do you find in terms of that? Are you looking for more compost hosts or more food scrap donors? Is it in balance, or are you heavy in one side?
So at the moment, about 1/6 of the whole community we have are compost hosts and the rest are donors. I would say that the community of compost hosts is growing a little bit slower and the rest is growing much faster. I think the main reason is that because share waste spreads mostly by word of mouth through people who are on social media, which is usually young people who very often don't have the capacity to compost themselves, and that's why they're usually donors.
So we need to get the word out to those who can compost and have that facility to do so, because they probably wouldn't be looking for somebody else's food scraps, but would happily.
Well, some people actually are. Some people have been for a long time quietly accepting food scraps for their from their neighbors or family, but a lot of people find it easier to do it through share waste, because onto share waste go the people who would like to do it. I mean, it's generally very difficult to ask a neighbor if you haven't been in touch with them. In general, it's very difficult to ask them for their scraps. It feels very awkward to most people. We're trying to normalize this. We're trying to make it normal that somebody has scraps, they're valuable, and somebody else can process them, so that together we would have more, we would have richer soil and greener gardens, and we could retain moisture in soil, etc.
Yeah, it's funny. I love my neighbours giving me stuff. They give me their compost scraps. They have a little fire. You know, that we have a quart, a really great quart. And I'm like, can I have the ash? They looked at me. I'm like, yeah, it's great for my compost. They're like, oh, okay, your compost. But that's okay. That's okay. I love it. That's great. So have you found that it's changed much at the moment in this current time? Are people doing this a bit more, or with caution, or is it just kind of the way it is?
Surprisingly, it has changed, but not in the way we would have expected. So a few compost hosts obviously had to close down their compost temporarily and stopped accepting new donors, simply for the reason that they didn't feel safe having people around. But at the same time, many of our compost hosts have a rotating container system. That means that when the donor comes to the host, they bring their scraps in a small container, they leave it there, take an empty one home, and they can go home without a personal meeting with the host, because the app enables all the communication contactlessly. It's very easy to set up a system like this. The other surprise we had was that because of COVID and also budget cuts, unfortunately, quite a few community composting places were closed down, not only temporarily, but some of them will be probably closed for quite a longer time. So those people who are used to take their food scraps to those composting places are now registering with share waste and looking for compost hosts there.
Right, we might have to do a call out through our networks and see who can accept a bit more waste. I know I can, if people want to come out my area.
Thank you.
Always putting lots of scraps into my compost. And I know I was working with some schools for doing their compost, but schools have been shut down a fair bit too. So people probably have more compost scraps at home as well. I might just ask Jo a question now, and if you've got questions for each other as a panel, I'll hand it over to you in a moment. But I'm curious, Jo, because you do a lot of things in the community. But what changes have you found? Like, you know, are you finding people coming to you freaking out, going, "I want to use my keep cup. How come I can't take my containers to the deli anymore?" And I've got to say, you know, my butcher is amazing, and I get a lot of free range and organic things, really quite specific meat from there, so I won't go anywhere else. And he wouldn't take my containers, but I said to him, "Can you just wrap it in paper?" So he wrapped it in paper and put it in my container. So that paper became part of my compost. So there's a way around it. So what are you finding at the moment, Jo?
Yeah, I guess, Kirsty, for me personally, and also for the community, I think we all had to give each other cut a bit of slack first and foremost, because it was an incredibly stressful time, if not anxiety around health, anxiety around finances and business and livelihoods, and all those other things were, jeopardized. So I think adding that pressure, even of the most, diehard, waste fighters in our community, we're having to go, you know what, I'm going to have to make concessions. And what I felt more than anything is that, it's particularly because I do quite a bit of work with responsible cafes, they had this really tricky element of, do we support the businesses that, we love and who have supported us with our mission to reduce waste by buying a coffee, and the only way they're going to give it to us is takeaway? Or do we forego that and be a bit more of a purist and say, well, I'm going to have to give that up until you accept my cup again? And look, I think there was a period there where there would have to be those concessions, but it seemed to evolve so quickly, and we're in a very fortunate position that, I think things seem to be slipping back to normal. I think the anxieties that I've seen are about the other single use that are keen to pop up. The litter that's on the ground from takeaway containers is more obvious, definitely. But I know we've seen gloves and masks and things, and all of a sudden we're like, we didn't realize we had to fight that single use as well. But I must say, having worked in a health background, that is where the single use is required when you're in a pandemic. So we can't escape the fact that single-use plastic has its place. I think if anything, it's highlighted that it has its place there and not in our everyday lives as a convenience item. I think we've seen the real use of single use, which is saving lives, and that therefore when we return to the post-pandemic life, we suddenly can accept that that's not why we should be using single use. We're not trying to save a life when we have a coffee. That's purely a convenience decision. So I feel like that's the shift that we need to focus on, is that there's an essential service and there's a luxury item, and we've got to focus on the fact that by choosing the convenience as a luxury, that's where we probably slipped up in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, single use is a choice. And just to show, look, I'm really lucky. My local that I would go, mind you, I don't drink coffee. I'm really upfront with that. So if I have something as a cup of tea, I sit down. I know, but still, I don't do the takeaway thing. But the local to me that would is the Full Pantry in Croydon. And they actually don't offer disposables, full stop, end of story. So they had a really big decision. Do we go back to disposables or not? And I was so proud of them for choosing not. They had a system where you put the cup down, they didn't touch it, they filled it, you took the cup away. So technically it was safer than disposables. And it just gives so much hope that it does. But I know it's different if a system still didn't have that in place, it would be there. I know I've got Costa saying here, I was going to try and put you on live so you could talk, Costa, but I don't have that superpower. And he was saying it's just gone away there. I can't find his words now. It's just flipped from my screen. Woo. Oh, Costa said something. Yes, it feels that way. I was going to read his words, but they've gone. I don't know why. I know Emily's in the background. I think that we're just going to have a quick little 30-second break or something like that, because we've got somebody
Costa on.
Oh, you've got Costa on.
Just putting Costa on. Costa can jump on quickly.
Do you want to just quickly run that little video that you wanted to show?
There we go. Here's Costa.
Oh, putting Costa on.
Yeah, hi everyone. I wasn't expecting to come on. I'm just enjoying.
Trying to read your words and the words disappeared, so you've got to say what you wrote.
Yeah. What did I write? I was just where was that I wrote? Q&A. Here it is. But yeah, the interesting thing you were saying is, okay, we go without our tricky little froth art, and we can live without froth art if you just hand the cup over and do that. And I've got people, I agree with you, Joe, because I got people from some alliances up in Townsville and beyond saying how they're really pushing now to bring the single-use cups back in, because you just don't want. Well, that's right, Kirsty. I was just saying, it's about the habits all of the good effort and the good habits that were built up were temporarily set to the side. But I think we can move forward, and I think it'll come back with just patience and not getting uptight if someone's just an employee and they go, no, well, that's what I've been told and the boss isn't here. You know, you don't give it to them and dump your frustration on them, because that's not going to help everyone's cause.
Yeah, that's right. And I found your comment now, but you've gone and said it, which is great. And I really think we've got a lot of research on this, and there's no evidence, there's nothing to show that it's transmitted through food and food-related things. So if the cup's been in a hot dishwasher, then that's going to kill it. We're going to be okay. But no one that they know of has caught it from food. So we're going to just assume that food is safe. There are other means to, you know, but it's just moving forward now. But that's really good. Okay, Emily, have you got this little video that you're playing? We've got some advertisers. So with our festival, I should explain what this video is going to be. If we had a festival in real life, we would have exhibitors, and we can't have exhibitors with this festival, or maybe we can. Well, that was interesting. I don't know how that worked for everyone, but I just couldn't get back into Zoom until it finished. I hope everyone else could see it, and it was just my weird Zoom setup. Do we have any questions? Would our lovely panelists like to ask anyone? I think Letitia and David may even have something they want to ask. I'm not quite sure. I'm just assuming I could be wrong.
Well, I'll jump in there. Not necessarily wanted to say anything to ask, but I just wanted to congratulate everybody who's worked so hard to keep their not-for-profits or their businesses or their social enterprises going during this time and pivot. It's been, you know, wonderful that Brunswick Tool Library have decided, well, let's go and offer a delivery service. I mean, that's just awesome that you've done that, because everybody's stuck at home. And it's like, for us, it was actually really good for donations, because people were stuck at home. They were like, well, let's have a garage cleanup. Let's have a house cleanup. And then they realized, well, they couldn't donate it to the Salvos or the Lifeline because they weren't taking donations. So it was like, well, we'll take your donations, you know, we'll have them. So there's actually benefits there. But it's so good to see that so many of our sort of grassroots organisations didn't just lie down. We said, okay, there's got to be a way to do things differently. And we've just got out there and made things happen. And in lots of ways, some people have seen it, it's brought community closer together. And that's what one of my passions about what we're doing this is, to build that community and build localized communities. And there's so much of that been happening. So that's another good positive we can take away from this, the great pause.
Great. I've got a few questions coming through, and I'll get you to hold there. And if anyone's got questions and you're not sure how to put them in, it just says the Q&A. There's a little button at the bottom of the screen, and just go in and pop your question there. So Karen Ellis, who is a very, very big repair person, she said that whilst we're talking repair with David, please consider signing the Bowers petition to the Australian government. It's the bower.org.au. We might put this link somewhere just in case not everyone can see us there. And we've also got Jay Lewis, who's asking, I would say this goes to Letitia, how's the Brunswick Tool Library funded and run? Well, it's run on volunteers, but is there any funding, Letitia?
So we receive money in a variety of ways. So one, we do charge an annual fee, and we do a concession rate as well. We accept donations, financial as well as tools. So that's actually important. So when we receive tools as a donation, whether they're new or old, that helps. And in turn, if we end up with surplus donations, we also offer some for sale. There's only so many screwdrivers tool library can actually store or use. So we do also get a little bit of funds from there. During the repair cafes as well, we invite donations. We occasionally get community grants, and we actually found doing late fees brings in a bit of spending money as well, because as well we want to make sure that we get the tools back, because sometimes that can be something that gets in the back of people's minds when there's no consequences. So we do have late fees, which made a big difference to actually regular financial flow, and we find our members are really great with it. In you know, they're happy to pop a few dollars in, and we also want to make sure that we work with people, because sometimes there's situations where those fees do accrue, but what's most important to us is making sure that we have the tools available to keep in circulation, and of course retaining members. So we don't want financial situations to be a barrier to being part of our community. So we have a variety of ways of income, and we do have support from our local council as well. So they, if I got it correctly, they help subsidise our location, so rent, because of course there are a lot of outgoings, but we've worked really well with the council as well. So there's a variety of areas of which we have money coming in, and of course going out. We always look at a variety of avenues, and you know, with our workshops, we keep them workshops and events. We keep them low cost, but if there's an extra $5 here or there, then that all goes towards keeping things turning over.
Great. Another question from the same person. I reckon that they're picking your brain here, but that's a good thing. What insurances do you need?
Okay, we have been talking a lot about insurance lately, so I don't actually have the exact list with me. It's a very good question.
A list.
So item number one is the people. So there is the insurance for volunteers. There is insurance for the members. There is waivers that also that coincide, because we are not prepared to take on insurance for everything. That is a very high cost to take on everything, and it's personal responsibility, making sure that we as people make sure that we're using things that we know how to use, or learning effectively, and that's part of what the tool library tries to offer is situations to learn. So
by that, can I just clarify, do you mean you're insuring your volunteers and members, but once they take that tool, that's their own prerogative, like that, you know, you're not covering that, and that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. And we made sure we maintain the tools ourselves, so that's important for making sure that we're providing a working product. It's really important to so there's plenty of resources. I did share a little one earlier, but making sure you do like a health and safety plan, risks and hazards plan, what you store and how you store it, fire risks and things like that. So actually creating the plans, and because of course there is insurance for the actual physical properties and items as well, but also there's so like the amount of volunteers that we have. I think we originally started with it's 20 or under, but making sure that you monitor things, because we had to change it because we got over 20 volunteers, which is fantastic.
Yay!
So there's making sure you keep in contact with your insurers so you know what you're getting. but also, you know, using the resources that are out there to do a checklist of, you know, the people, the location, the places, what isn't covered. So yeah, basically the people in a variety of forms and the items.
Great, thank you. I'm going to hand this one, it's obviously for Ellie. Hannah says, I'm a share waste host and sadly get them to put in bags and containers to freeze before putting in the compost bin plus sawdust from local sawmill. Not quite sure. Is that a question?
What was the?
Says,
that sounds like a tip to me.
Okay, it does sound like a tip actually, yes. Yeah, so she gets people to put the bags, so freeze things before putting them in the compost bin.
Yes, that's very clever. So we usually recommend either freezing or refrigerating the scraps before putting them in the compost. Obviously, it keeps them fresher for a long time and it's a good prevention from any odors.
I've got a question for Ellie, Kirsty, if I can do that.
Yeah, hi Joe.
I'd love to know how councils can support share waste, because I know a lot of councils are looking at FOGO and they're struggling, particularly in metropolitan areas, what to do with it, how to struggle with contamination, and the people that need to use it are the people who live in apartments. And FOGO in that is just a nightmare. How can councils support share waste? Because ultimately that's the most local, grassroots, easy solution to manage organics.
Yes, thanks for a great question. So at the moment we have two collaborations going on. One is with the Auckland Council in New Zealand, and we run a specific New Zealand site called sharewaste.org.nz, which looks like a council site, but it's merged together with Sharewaste. So they get both information from the council and from Sharewaste, so we can easily collaborate. They run composting workshops, they provide discounted bins to people who register Sharewaste and the other way around. And the other council is the City of Canterbury Bankstown Council in Sydney. And for them, we're helping to process data about how people compost, how much waste they process, and we're trying to collaborate on how to get more people on board Sharewaste, what they actually need to start composting, what things might be barriers for them to start, and how we can get more people onto the network so that obviously they can compost more waste locally. So yes, if there is any council who would like to collaborate or who would like to think about how we could collaborate, please reach out to us. We'd love to.
Fantastic. That's good to know. And this one is from Chloe for Letitia, or I suppose David could answer it too, but it might be specific. If someone has specialty tools they can loan, can they loan them to the tool library?
So this is an interesting question. So generally we do have a tool manager, and we are prepared to listen. But we find that actually if someone else owns the tools, it's more complicated than is necessary. So one of the ways that it can still contribute is maybe being part of a workshop. If we do a workshop or Skillshare, it really does depend on the item, and because a factor for us is also space. So having tools that either do or don't belong to us is something that always has to be considered. And so if it is a specialty tool, how much use will it be to the community, and how we can use it? So it's often it's a no, because it just gets a bit too complicated. But again, depending on what the tool is, we're open. We are open. So we do like to review, and so we do suggest people contact us and say, this is what we have, these are some ideas, and we'll give a yes or no.
So kind of case by case. And I can see some things could be so specialised that, you know, they might be used once or twice a year, which could take up a lot of space. But it might be a specialty tool, but also in demand each week. And that I can see how that would change the, you know, what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and so that's also where we do encourage our members to say, hey, what is it that you're looking for? And if we happen to know that last year someone contacted us saying, hey, look, we've got this thing in our shed that we don't always use, wondering if you can use it, and maybe we can make connections or something. So, but again, there's the insurance factor and just a number of processes that sometimes it's easier to say no, but we do try and keep things noted so that we can connect people with helpful things. And definitely events are a great way. The workshops and skill shares are a great way to connect with different opportunities.
Sure. David, do you have a policy on that? Have you come across this before?
Not us particularly, but I've spoken to other libraries about it too, and exactly what the teacher said. There's a bit of a insurance issue there, and there's also sort of like that ownership issue, because while the return rate and the care rate of tools is extremely good in libraries, and a lot of libraries say that quite often tools come back in better condition than when they went out, because there's a lot of passionate people who are adopters of early adopters of these types of sharing platforms who really believe in the system. But there's also other peer-to-peer tool hiring platforms out there where people can actually list specialty tools that they have available, and then other people can then go and hire those tools. So there's, outside of the tool library system, there's other systems there that can kind of help with those specialty things. As Letitia said, it really comes back to case by case of, is that person who's loaning that particular specialty tool understanding that there is a risk that it may not come back, or it may not come back in exactly the same condition that they loaned it in. And if they're accepting of that, well then, yes, if you've got a good agreement with them. But yeah, it's probably case by case, as Letitia said.
Fair enough. That makes sense. Now we're going to stick with the tools for the moment. Do you have to tag and test your tools, and how often?
Do you want that one, Letitia? You're still on mute.
Yes, I can give that a shot. So yes, we definitely test and tag our tools. So one of the things we have maintenance Mondays, where we're regularly checking everything, fixing things and doing and testing and tagging. So the tags we put on when we check those, both whenever we have the opportunity, particularly if it's quiet, then we'll wander around and might check all the tools. But when people return and take out tools, we'll check the test and tag. And so number one, we prioritise the legal requirements of how often we have to test and tag, but we also will use discretion. If something is used regularly, we'll shorten that amount of time of which we, say if it's recommended every 6 months, we might do it every 2 months or 3 months if it's got high turnover, to make sure that we're looking at the tool, reviewing and make sure it's in the best possible condition. So yes, we test and tag, and yeah, of course, number one, the requirements by law, but also our discretion, knowing our tools, how often they go out, and just wanting to give them a good check over.
Great. And there's another part to that. It's like, do you give the tools out with instructions, and do people have to have done a course or pass a standard before they use, which is probably fair with something like, a chainsaw.
David, did you want to take this one? I've definitely got ideas about it, but
yeah. Well, we could both share on that one. Yeah, a lot of it comes back to user manuals and the safety side of things, and it's also to the, like I know, say, Tulo in the Blue Mountains, I believe their system, like they loan out chainsaws, but they also run chainsaw workshops. They live in a heavily wooded environment, so they work with the actual training. Like, we're not going to loan out chainsaws just because we don't necessarily in Gold Coast suburbia have the need for a lot of people to going around and chopping wood and trees. There's also really high risk factors and high risk for insurances on those types of products. But yeah, say we have a circular saw or an angle grinder. handheld angle grinders can often be high risk and create accidents because people use them incorrectly. The rotating disc is rotating at thousands of RPM and it can shatter and fly around. Or you get a kickback where the whole machine can kick back and twist around and hit you. So a lot of it comes back to the self-assessment of, are you capable of using this item? And if you have any doubts, then let's find one of our members who can show you and help train you. Or if that's not possible, then say, okay, well, let's put that aside and come to a workshop on Tool 101 or how to use. Those sort of things can be offered. But also a lot of tool libraries provide either in a digital format or in a paper format, the manual of every single tool, and it's the onus of the borrower to make sure they read and understand that and self-assess, are we capable of using this, to just make sure that everybody is safe, so that no one's getting hurt.
Great question. And here's another one that's been directed at you. Chloe would love to know what unexpected items can be repaired. Like, what have you repaired or seen something repaired that you wouldn't expected you could, but we can?
In the Repair Cafe moment, and I think online is Karen from Mend It, Australia, who they travel around and visit repair cafes all around Victoria. They would have some great stories of things that can be repaired. It really comes back to what volunteers you've got in your pop-up repair cafe at that time. Textiles are extremely popular because, so many of us have got, whether it be a textile, clothing, boots, belts, shoes, and all those sorts of things. But, I've seen on social media the posts of a lot of repair cafes, as long as you can carry it in and it's safe to operate in, it's safe for the volunteers to operate with, you can bring in virtually anything. In it be sort of like antique cuckoo clocks. You've just got some really cool people who just understand mechanics and they can open stuff up and pull things apart. And that's the great thing about repair cafes is you sit down and you do it together. Like, it's not a drop-off service. The whole idea is you do the repairs and the mending together. So there's that whole exchange of knowledge and sharing and bonding that happens over the thrill of pulling something apart and having a good look at the guts inside and that repairing it. But yeah, if people are interested, just have a flick through the social media of some of the repair cafes out there, and they're usually always posting pictures of what's been repaired. But a whole diverse range of antique types of products through to modern products, and more often than not, it can be items that are a little bit of age that get repaired, because unfortunately there is so much of our modern day product which you simply can't repair. It's made that you can't pull it apart. You can't actually get parts for it. It's all plastic molded and you can't actually get inside. So it's often some of the, that's why that right to repair movement that's gaining movements around the world and gaining strength there. A lot of governments are aiming to, being petitioned to have the right to repair to reduce waste is very important. But if you're interested to see some cool stuff, just have a look on some of the social media pages. And I'm sure Letitia's seen some really cool stuff come through there, Brunswick Repair Cafe.
Yes, that sounds good. And you mentioned Karen Ellis from Mend It Australia. She's being interviewed next Saturday as part of our festival at 11 a.m. So if you've got more questions about this type of thing, jump on and we'll have Karen and maybe others to speak about that as well. We've got some questions coming in all over now. We've got O'Brien Carter here saying to the panel, how do you maintain motivation and momentum being volunteer-run organisations? It's a really good question. Who would like to answer that? Letitia, Ellie, I don't know, just turn your microphone off and talk, or on and talk.
I think Letitia wants to jump in first. I will say two things. One, please respect and support volunteers, because I've worked with a lot of organisations who just assume that people are going to always be there to turn up and do this stuff. And also, if you are someone who uses volunteers or works with them, look at a strong financial model which can support the organisation so there isn't financial impact on the people who are giving their time as well. Because, yeah, it's a really tricky space to make sure people don't burn out.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, I'll comment that for us, it's really helped to, so I've only been involved for about a year, but when I came in, there was already a lot of systems in place. So when people are ready and motivated, they're doing things like strategic map, understanding the values of the organisation and the mission. So actually putting the effort into creating that early on, and that way you've got a basis when people do come and go. You sort of say, as long as we've got our core and we're sticking to our core, we can keep the focus on what our aim is. So making sure our focus is where it needs to be, and also understanding where we need help. So we have a board that keep things running, but because we also have a forum and a way to keep in contact online, staying connected. So when people aren't available, that's fine, they're not there, but the other people who are available and prepared to do things have a way to communicate. So setting up ways to communicate is really important, so that people can come and go, and you stick to your core and keep things running with who and how things are available.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just going to add to that a little bit, because Zero Waste Victoria, we are a volunteer-run organisation, and everybody who put this online festival together, 4 days of, I'll say craziness, because doing this is crazy. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And I know that when we started doing this, it's a big testament to Emily, who's in the background with this, and the group there, because I know when I looked at it, I was like, that's a cool idea, but I've got my kids at home who I love, and they're just, you know, I don't want to say sucking me, but shucking me. They go back on Tuesday, and I'm going to miss them a lot, but they took a lot of time. But what we actually did was we had to look at it, because to put this festival on was really quite a big goal as a festival coordinator, in the time that we had to do it, because we wanted it. We didn't want to have it at the end of the year like we did last year, in case it's back to normal, because we want it to be back to normal. But it was one of those challenges. So we actually got more people on board. We just put some calls out and had more people come in to do this. The other thing I think that we do, and I know that I'm trying to do this, is to streamline what we do, which can be quite of a challenge, because we get a lot of inquiries and they're all really cool, but sometimes it's like, it's just too big for us. So sometimes you've got to learn when to say no, which is challenging, a very big challenge, but it's just, you know, keeping each other and having each other's back. And I know something for me, you know, being I guess we're in the forerunner of Zero Waste Victoria, I've actually just, for me, I've had to turn around and say I can't do this, and draw some boundaries, and that's been the toughest thing for me to do as an individual. And I say that because I keep getting pulled back into things, but I'll just say this is when I'm switching off, and I'll do it the next day. Sometimes tomorrow it's okay, as much as I want it done yesterday, and I say that just knowing that it's me, and then I also put that on to others. So I find one of the biggest things that I do is lower expectations, because I just know that volunteers will drop off. Not because they don't like what we're doing, just because life happens, you know, and they've suddenly got this part-time job, which is amazing, and now it's full-time. And they just can't give you those hours. So I'm always mindful that we're going to lose those volunteers, or they're going to drop their time back. And when they don't, it's fantastic. And that's just from years and years and years of working with volunteers. Does anyone else have anything else to add to that? I didn't mean to jump in, but it's just something that's so close to what we do. Is that, yeah?
Sorry, can I say a few words?
Sure.
I just like to talk to all the people out there. I just wanted to say that if you do love something somebody else does, an organization, a program, anything, just let them know. Show your support. There are so many ways how to do so. You don't have to be the one who starts the whole thing, but you can be, they can grow on your support. You can send them a nice email. Even better if you do it publicly. You can give them kudos on social media. You can write a testimonial, take a photo. You can volunteer your time. If you do love somebody's work, please let them know. It's really important because this is what we need to keep going.
Sure is. And I'm going to cheekily do a plug for Zero Waste Victoria because I can. We have a membership base and we really would love to grow our memberships. Our membership, I think there's a few different options, $5 or $10 or $20 a month, whatever you can do. And that membership goes a long way to what we can do. And to be really upfront, we are a volunteer-run organisation. We would love dearly to be able to employ someone. It will be very, very part-time, but it will be to do those things that either we don't have a volunteer with that skill set or the time and dedication to do. There's just so much that we could do. So if your volunteer organisation, whether it be Zero Waste Victoria or the Tool Library or anything has a form, just just put in a few dollars, buy them a coffee. It won't go to coffee, it'll go to something else, but we'll feel great that you've done it. So yes, so jump onto our website and become a proud and paid up volunteer member for Zero Waste Victoria, and that will help us a long way too. I'm just going to jump back to some questions here. David and Letitia, have you had any contact with the men's shed associations who receive and share tools?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. Men's sheds are awesome organisations and they form a really, really good purpose for men's mental health. Depending on, different organisations and different states, different sheds, I'm sure it's very, very different. What I have found though with men's sheds is they do that really, really well in connecting men together. Say for example, Gold Coast Tool Library, our Facebook page, 77% of our followers are women. And I've been speaking to 6 other sort of like tool libraries around the country in getting information. All of them have been started and are driven by women. It doesn't mean men are not involved, but the feminine is extremely popular within the tool library, and it expands out to what they call libraries of things, lots, lending libraries. I think the feminine really embraces and understands that caring for community, caring for country, caring for the environment, and they're such also good networkers that I think that's why females are so popular within the lending libraries situations. And in most men's sheds, women are not welcome. It's not that they don't want them there as such, but it's a men's space and it's designed there for men's mental health. Having said that, one of our local men's sheds is actually a women's shed 2 days a week. 2 days a week it gets turned over and it's a women's shed because men's sheds have got a wealth of experience, but they also have huge amounts of gear and great gear. They have, table saws and CNC routing machines and all that great big equipment that is so useful to being used. But also men's sheds have been big supporters because quite often it's the first place people go to donate their tools and they just end up with way too many. And as Letitia said, there's only so many drills and screwdrivers and hammers one men's shed can use. So they then tend to sort of pass them along to other organisations. So yeah, I think there's great use. I mean, I'm really big in sharing, and that can be sharing resources and things as well, because men's sheds operate usually, pretty intensely in the mornings and afternoons, but in the late afternoons after school time and in the evenings, they're usually empty. And all of those resources are sitting there and they're not being used. If it could be set up well, that those men's sheds could convert to a maker's space in the evening so that people can finish work, get the kids from school, come in and actually use amazing amounts of equipment that is there, because there's often, $100,000 worth of equipment sitting in a men's shed. That type of equipment could then be put to better use in a time of day where the functioning of the men's shed has sort of, has finished for the day. And like if you're a grandfather and you want to bring your granddaughter in to, build a possum house or something, well, you can't take her to a men's shed because you can't bring her there. But if that men's shed was then a maker's space in the evening, a mother and her son or a grandfather and a granddaughter could all go in there together and actually utilize that amazing amount of resources, and it could be shared and put together to better use. Anyway, that was my soapbox. I'll get off that now.
No, look, I think that's great. My son, who's a teenager now, went through a woodworking phase when he was about 8 or 10, and we're in Melbourne, and you know my father's on the Gold Coast, and he did some woodworking with him, which was great. But he only came back wanting more, and of course we couldn't do that. And I tried very hard to find lessons for him. There aren't many lessons for young kids to do woodwork, and in the end I contacted a men's shed, and they took both my boys in. I couldn't stay, and one school holidays, and they taught them how to make a few things, which they put a huge amount of effort in. Actually, I could stay a little bit. I think that I did, but not the whole time, just to break them in. And I think that opening it up to families and things, and to have that family figure when we didn't have that family figure local, like we had that family figure, but to do it over the phone's not the same. And that was just a really amazing thing that they did. I wasn't asking them to do something different. I was asking for somewhere that did it. So yeah, open up to families is really a good thing. I've got something here from Phil, and I don't know this. Doesn't the Parramatta Bower run a women's shed? Does that mean something to you? Do you know Parramatta Bower? Anyone? Letitia? Or?
I do. I do believe there is a space for women. Phil's from Parramatta area. I know him quite well. Yeah, I think there is, and I think it's a space that it's really interesting to hear you, David, say that, because I think there's a community of, you need to feel welcome to want to go into a space, and you need to feel like not only the mission for repair is met, but your social and community connections are welcome and encouraged and invited, because it's a real step to take, you know, to walk through the doors of a new space and go, hey, this is my first time, I've never done this. So I think to have that community for women and for men that is safe is really important. But yeah, the Bower does some awesome stuff up in New Sydney.
Great. Well, I am being given some messages, and that message is, Kirsty, you need to wrap this up. And I feel like we're just getting into it. I knew that would happen. It always does. So I want to thank everybody for coming along. Thank you, Joe, for tuning in. You're in Sydney, is that right? Yes. Thank you, Ellie.
I am.
Yes, Sydney as well. I should know this information. I'm sure I do. And Letitia from Brunswick
Yes.
Local, and David from Gold Coast. Thank you. We do have other events on today. If you don't know our full program, jump onto the Zero Waste Victoria page to get the festival lineup and all the Zoom links to jump in. But thank you all. And if there are any more questions, just send them through to Zero Waste Victoria, or you can contact these people directly. And thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Kirsty.
Thank you.
Great festival.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure.